This is How About That Podcast, a show dedicated to all things Dallas Cowboys. With both objective and subjective perspectives, How About That Podcast is your place to hear about America's team. Now, here's Joseph Hoyt and Danny Morales.
Joey, do you like video games?
I do. Video games are great.
Did you ever play? See, you're young. You made me feel really old when you're like, oh man, 23. Ugh. Making me feel old and gray. Did you ever play NCAA 14?
I don't think there's a video game I've played more in my life than NCAA 14.
Wow, you're an old soul.
Over the pandemic, I rebuilt UMass into an SEC powerhouse. I think I'm in the year like 2034 in that game with UMass in Dynasty. So yeah, I've definitely played that game once or twice.
What was your strategy with building up UMass? Did you just say, hey, we're going to hit Massachusetts hard? Are we going to go JUCO? How did you do it?
No, just top guy. Basically, whoever the top players were or whoever the best players were, would just go after them. And it started off slow, obviously. Like you get lucky and get like 1 or 2 in the first 2 years. And it was like, great, I got like 1 5-star. Because NCAA just kind of whatever, you can put all your recruiting points at it and get lucky. But then by the end, once I had won like a couple national championships, you gain some credibility. You know, you kind of got to work your way, get a little gritty, win with teams that are bad and overachieve. And then once you do that, the recruiting gets a lot easier. And now my team has been the best team in the entire country for the past 20 years.
Dynasty. Absolute dynasty. The teams I always used in 14 were Idaho and San Jose State. I would like switch off and do the same thing. You build them up and you turn them into powerhouses. The reason I brought that up is because Tuesday, July 2nd, and EA Sports did a deep dive video into what their dynasty mode is going to look like. And Joey, like I've been trying to temper expectations a little bit, just knowing what EA has done with Madden. It hasn't been good. So I've been trying to really chill out a little bit, but I got to be honest, this game looks incredible. It's hard to temper at this point because it looks so much fun. It's got some crazy features. You can search a recruit's social media to get hints into how to recruit them. You can shoot them DMs at certain points. You can call their families. It's insane. I'm blown away by what they've put together there so far. And it looks like it's going to be a game. Honestly, it looks like a game by college football fans for college football fans.
My only problem with it so far is seeing the ratings come out and Colorado having like an 84 overall defense. And
oh yeah,
just there's been some like Tennessee wasn't ranked, I think, in the top 25 of either, like of just like best teams. It's just been really interesting ratings wise, but everything else I totally agree.
Yeah. You know who they had pretty high up there, Joey?
Who's that?
Oh, they had Oregon at 3, which
they deserve to be.
Right. Feels right. And I don't know who did it, but there was a screenshot going viral of a projected CFP today and with the 12-team playoff. And they had Oregon winning the national championship over Ohio State, a rematch of the first CFP. So there's a little bit of symmetry there. Then now they have the first expanded one. But this time, Oregon prevails. No Ezekiel Elliott running all over AT&T Stadium like he would for years. This is the Ducks' time. And I don't know, man. College football, I know this is an NFL Cowboys podcast, but college football has got me excited for this season.
Yeah, the 12-team definitely makes things really wacky and so different compared to what we're normally used to.
Maybe UMass sneaks in. You know, who knows?
Maybe they're that one G5 team.
Maybe it's time for the Minutemen. Maybe it's time.
Yeah, I think their time is past, aka it's not 1770s anymore. You know, their time might be gone.
I was going to say, did they have a time or did that end with like the British are coming?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, hello, Cowboys fans. Good. We've been kind of keeping it a little bit slow on the podcast episodes just because, to be frank, there's not a lot going on right now. But there is enough to talk about on like a week-to-week basis, which is kind of the schedule we got going a little bit right here. It's Tuesday, July 2nd. We just had July 1st. We got July 4th coming up, which I'm stoked about. Long weekend approaching. There's been some news with the Cowboys. The first place I want to go to, Joey, is actually not really an on the field thing, but an off the field thing. And we had some news last week, I believe, with Dak Prescott's legal case. And just a quick refresher, Dak Prescott, it was kind of weird how the news came out, because the first piece of news that came out was actually that Dak Prescott was suing a woman for a $100 million extortion plot. But that was due to a woman sending him a letter saying like, hey, like, give me money, or, ultimately the letter said, hey, there was an alleged sexual assault in 2017. Give me money or else I'm going to go public with it, basically. And you have a month to respond. So Dak filed an extortion suit. She then filed, a civil suit of sexual assault or sexual harassment or assault against Dak. Long story short, back and forth. There's been a lot of developments. Dallas police investigated. They could find no evidence, or not enough evidence to move forward with the investigation. They didn't press charges against Dak for what allegedly happened in 2017 in Dallas. And then the big news recently, though, was because the cases were both moved to Collin County. And the Collin County judge granted a motion to dismiss the allegations in the case against Dak Prescott. So that's big news in the Dak Prescott case. There's going to be, I believe in September, another hearing for potential sanctions against the defendant in the extortion case and the plaintiff in the other case that has now been dismissed. So that's a big thing for Dak Prescott, a big legal win. And, that kind of, for at least now, puts to rest at least that aspect of the off the field stuff with Dak Prescott. The other news happened this weekend. It's been kind of one of those things, Joey, where we all know that's the case, but kind of information went a little viral, and it was credited to Calvin Watkins of the Dallas Morning News that CeeDee Lamb is prepared to miss training camp time as he awaits a new contract extension. Not really surprising, because we already know that he missed mandatory minicamp and he accumulated over $100,000 in fines. Very, very interesting at the time, but there was still a big, large gap. And we still, at the time of this recording, still have exactly 3 weeks until they report to training camp, meaning there's no action yet on whether or not CeeDee Lamb is going to miss training camp or not. But he's prepared to do it. So doesn't surprise me at all. Does that surprise you?
No, I would do the same thing if I were CeeDee Lamb. You don't give them that satisfaction of you being there until you get the money that you're supposed to be getting paid. Obviously, he deserves to be paid like a top 3 receiver in the NFL, and that's the money he's going for. I would do the same exact thing.
Yeah, and then it's a smart business move at this point, and honestly, it's kind of a tried and true method, is to put pressure on one side of the coin there. And if CeeDee Lamb is going to get paid a lot, which he inevitably will, he might also have to, at least temporarily, face some fines. And so I wrote a big, long story on Lone Star Live about this, and you can check the text version for more information. But I kind of want to give you a little bit of an explainer on the CeeDee Lamb case and what he potentially could be facing in terms of fines. So because of the collective bargaining agreement, CeeDee Lamb is facing a maximum fine of $40,000 per each day missed at training camp. And training camp is classified as the day they report until the Sunday before week 1. So there's 3 preseason games, then there's another week, and then the Monday of week 1 begins after that. So long story short, it's about 4 to 5 weeks of time. So that's a lot of money. In addition, because of the CBA, CeeDee Lamb could also miss preseason games at that time. And there's 3 of them. And if he misses a preseason game, then he's fined 1/18 of what he's going to make. So a week's salary of what he's going to make this coming season. He's going to be on the 5th-year option, which means he's facing right now a current pay structure of $17.99 million this season, which is not cheap. So do the math, divide that by 18, and you're talking about just under $1 million per preseason game missed. And in the time that they're in Oxnard, by the way, they're going to practice 17 times. So again, 17 times 40, do the math. All this being said, he could miss, according to, if he were to miss, all 17 practices in 3 games before they leave Oxnard and come back to Dallas, he's looking at fines worth up to a maximum of, before practices of that last week. So we don't know what the schedule would be. That's $3.68 million, Joey. So that's not cheap. That's a lot of money. It's almost a quarter of what he's going to be making this season, or more, almost a sixth. So all that sounds pretty, scary for CeeDee Lamb, right? Well, here's the kicker. According to the CBA, players that are on their rookie contracts, and this includes players on their fifth-year option, these fines are not mandatory. So, for example, Zach Martin last year missed a lot of time in training camp as he waited a new contract. Ultimately, he had to pay about $1 million in fines. That was mandatory according to the CBA because he's a veteran. He's passed his first rookie deal, blah, 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 blah. CeeDee Lamb, however, is in a different case. For example, all you have to do is look back last season what the 49ers did with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa missed the entire training camp, the entire preseason. So just like CeeDee Lamb, you're facing around nearly $4 million in fines, right? Well, they're not mandatory. And to keep their star in good graces, obviously, the 49ers waived every single penny. They didn't have to pay it. They didn't have to fine him. So they didn't. So that was 3.6, 3.5, whatever you want to call it, $1 million that Nick Bosa was, quote, facing that didn't actually happen. So CeeDee Lamb would be in the same boat as that. Now, I mean, of course, I think it's worth noting that just because you can waive it doesn't mean they would. But also, why would you want to anger your star player after you had just signed him?
I would love to know the number of guys that are playing on their fifth year and have done this exact same thing and had to pay the fines compared to Nick Bosa's situation where he didn't. Like, how many teams were just like, nope, you're paying that $3.7 million or that however many dollars it is. Like, we're making you pay. You should have been at training camp.
So it's from the last CBA, which I believe was 2020, maybe 2018. One of those, I kind of get it confused sometimes, but it's recent. So that's a distinction in the last CBA. I don't think people have made them pay. So history says that, and it makes sense. Why would you want to, hey, CeeDee Lamb, we're paying you, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, X amount of million per year. Oh, by the way, we're going to take $4 million and fine you from that million. So sorry, now you're locked in with us and you are angry.
Ugh, yeah, no, I can't imagine there's any reason why a team would want to do that.
Yeah, but hey, teams are crazy. The NFL is crazy. News is crazy. The one thing I found, Joey, about covering sports, I don't even know if you have an example off the top of your head. The unexpected happens all the time. It's crazy. I mean, dude, I never forget. Like, this is an example I go to with this because I was covering high school sports for the Dallas Morning News, and I get a text from like a random number, like, "Oh my God, Art Briles is going to be a high school coach in Texas." And I'm like, stop, there's no way. And they're sitting at Mount Vernon High School. And I'm like, I don't even know where that is. And I have a pretty good geography of DFW. When you cover high schools, you got to know, like, you got to know that where Ferris is, and you got to know that the Yellow Jackets, and you got to know the Weatherford Kangaroos, you got to know all these things, right? I didn't even know where Mount Vernon was. It ended up being 90 minutes outside of Dallas, basically due east. But I was like, no way. And then all of a sudden, more texts, more breaking news. And then Art Briles is, his first job in America since Baylor is become a high school coach at a 3A school in Texas. So it's just crazy. The unexpected happens all the time.
It definitely does. I haven't had a specific moment like that, I feel like, in my career. I mean, because mostly I started covering sports at UMass and everything was pretty expected. You kind of knew when guys were going to get fired and who was going to get hired. It all made sense.
There was no big scandal at UMass at your time? Nothing like, whoa, like that was shocking.
The only scandal, quote unquote, was actually kind of a BS one. They took away some of the UMass men's basketball team's wins from 2013, but the team that got most penalized was the tennis team because they had a phone, like a phone jack in their dorm that they got money for, or basically like the school paid for it for them when they weren't supposed to. So they just vacated a bunch of wins and conference titles, and they're like, we don't even use this thing, and you're take it was crazy. It was crazy. But nothing, no, not that I can think of off the top of my head of like, holy crap. There's probably something out there. But nothing that stands out. But I mean, of course, unexpected stuff happens all the time. And I feel like that's the beauty of sports. That's what makes it so excited and makes you want to keep watching.
Yeah, I mean, good ways, bad ways, everything in between. It's crazy. But long story short, that's a little bit of an explainer on CeeDee Lamb. I expect him obviously if he's not signed a deal to not be at training camp until it happens. And one thing I think that we're going to have to wait and see is how would that quote unquote affect him, right? I mean, he's still working out, he's still running around, he's still throwing with Dak Prescott this offseason. I don't think it would be huge. He has the fundamentals of Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy's offense from last season. I don't think there'd be a huge impact, but I think it's also natural though, and I think this kind of doesn't get talked about. There's a difference between being in shape and like being in football shape. And I think, when you're kind of going through the fundamentals every day, it's almost like if you were like a golfer, right? And all you did was hit the range on your own and you never ever played the game at all. Like you would lose some of your ability, I believe. And that's something that I think with football all the time. I think that your skill can only carry you so far as you sharpen on your own. I think Zach Martin kind of was a testament to that last year, even though he had an all-pro season. He's talked about that. He was definitely rustier than he thought. It took some time. Though he had a really good season, it wasn't his best. And so I think that's something he said he's excited for training camp, which is not something you hear from a lot of 33-year-old veterans.
Wow. Yeah, I'm interested to know. I don't know if you heard this recently, and this is a cross-sport reference. The whole Damian Lillard like trading thing last year and how he requested a trade and whatever. He told Doc Rivers, and Doc Rivers said this on the Bill Simmons podcast, how he was afraid to work out the entire summer because he didn't want to get hurt before he got traded and mess up his contracts and all that stuff. So he just didn't work out and he came into the season out of shape. And that kind of affected the way he played and everything like that. But CeeDee's not in that. Like, would an injury affect how much he gets paid?
No. Unless it was, not trying to, speak injuries into existence, but hypothetically, if he had something while working on his own and it was right before he's about to become a free agent, it might affect the structure of things. But at the end of the day, CeeDee's now a proven quantity. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit in terms of how much he's going to get paid. But, if the Cowboys don't pay him, he's going to get paid. If he, like, hypothetically, if he gets season-ending injury on his own, go into free agency off that, someone would pay him a lot of money.
Yeah.
At least you'd expect that too. You'd expect it.
And it might not be Justin Jefferson money, but I bet it's still top 3 receiver money.
Well, why don't we just segue right into that then? Let's talk about CeeDee Lamb and what he's going to make next season and beyond, because it's interesting. So we know this. We know Justin Jefferson is getting paid $35 million per year. That is the apex. And so the question is CeeDee Lamb going to get that, or where does he fall if he doesn't? There was a tweet that went viral July 1st, and it's from Pretty Ricky at Pretty Ricky 213. And Joe, you know me, I normally don't give a lot of this stuff a lot of light of day unless I'm kind of talking about it, blah 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 blah, and kind of, I hate aggregates, doing my old man yells at cloud. But Pretty Ricky has 28,000 followers. His tweet drew the reaction of others that are reputable that made me kind of, and I haven't seen much of his, so sorry, Pretty Ricky. But anyways, he tweeted that CeeDee Lamb will request to be traded if the Cowboys do not offer him a new contract worth at least $32 million per year. He wants to be at least the second highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. And I thought this was interesting. And I saw Bobby Belt from The Fan talked about this too on Twitter. The reason why that tweet is super interesting to me, Joey, is because probably a couple of hours before that tweet even happened, I had heard from a couple people that $32 million is the floor for CeeDee Lamb in terms of his thoughts. He will not go lower than 32. So I thought that was interesting. The one thing I haven't heard is like he would request a trade if it went below that. But you can't rule anything out. Deebo Samuel requested a trade before he got signed to a longer term deal. Brandon Ayuk, speaking of the 49ers, has been also playing a similar game of like, hey, I'm not requesting a trade, but I'm hanging with Jaden Daniels. So, let me out of here. But so not speaking to the trade part, but the $32 million is kind of what I heard from people that could be the floor in terms of CeeDee Lamb's mind. And he obviously wants higher. I think he wants to be the second highest paid receiver in the NFL. I think he understands what Justin Jefferson has done. that Justin Jefferson kind of deserves that top part of the market. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb would love to make more than that. But in terms of negotiation and the back and forth and where do you settle, I think he would be totally okay settling $32 to $34 million per year. That's a lot of money, though.
That's a lot of money. I think he's worth it though. To see if he has, I mean, that was his first season in the McCarthy system, and obviously him and Dak stayed healthy, and that's a big part of why they were able to have so much success. But I mean, if they stay healthy, I feel like that's a very attainable thing for them to do on a yearly basis. Maybe a little dip in like yards or something, because the yards he was putting up was insane, but he is very, very good, and they were both obviously super comfortable in that offense. So, I mean, I don't see why he shouldn't be getting paid that money.
Yeah, I think you ask anyone in the NFL, certify a top 5 wide receiver consensus. Now, where he ends up on that list is pretty, I think, debatable. I think he probably has an argument to be number 2. But then you have guys like, Jamar Chase, who's kind of underperformed a little bit. You still have Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, number 1, or Justin Jefferson. There's 2, 3. It's tough to actually peg once you get into that top 5. I mean, who the top 5 are. So that's interesting. I don't see any trade requests on the horizon. I think the thing that would happen was he would miss training camp, with the aspiration that any potential fines would be waived. I mean, if the Cowboys come out and say, hey, no, we're going to play hardball, we're not waiving that. That'd be interesting. But, at the end of the day, the Cowboys want CeeDee Lamb in a Cowboys uniform. And I think CeeDee Lamb knows what he's been able to do with this offense and with that quarterback. And if you get paid that top dollar to continue to have continuity, why leave? We've seen receivers leave before to get paid. We saw Tyreek Hill leave Kansas City because he wasn't going to be able to get that much money that he did in Miami. Obviously, it's worked out for him too. I don't foresee a situation where CeeDee Lamb's not a Cowboy for a long time.
Can I ask you, what do you think the benefit for the Cowboys would be? Say CeeDee Lamb didn't come to training camp, and it was because they were disputing over like $1 million per year. Like they want to do 32 and CD wants like 33 or 34. Would that $1 million or 2 a year be that much of like an argument that it could impact into the season how CeeDee Lamb plays and Dak and CeeDee's connection, especially at the start of the year, if they miss that like obviously important time together in training camp? Not to say that they aren't both really good at what they do and they'll be like fine, or like not like they'll be bad, but it could be better if he's there. And is that worth sacrificing that $1 million or $2 per year?
It's interesting. And I think one thing that's interesting about that question is I think we're kind of asking like, okay, would CeeDee Lamb sacrifice, okay, fine, I'll settle for 32 versus 33? Or would he go down to the absolute wire and say, no, I want what's mine, and I'm going to get what's mine? I think the answer, Joey, we don't know, to be honest. Because, question, would that surprise you if if Brandon Ayuk held out for that much money? Like if he said, no, I want what's mine. You guys have kind of disrespected me probably by offering me, let's say 25 million, right? Whatever it is. You're not on the CeeDee Lamb tier. He feels disrespected. So I'm going to get everything I want. Wouldn't surprise you, because guess what? We've heard a lot from Brandon Ayuk this offseason. A lot, right? And it's not that shocking. We have not heard from CeeDee Lamb, really. There hasn't been there's been a couple like Instagram posts, like kind of cryptic-y of like, hey, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to get paid, but also that's not crazy. We haven't heard CeeDee Lamb come out. We haven't seen a video of CeeDee Lamb, FaceTiming with Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield saying like, yo, come get me. Like, I'm coming to Tampa, or the Cowboys don't want me anymore. I'm coming to Arizona. So we haven't seen that. So I don't know, to be honest with you. I think in his mind though, 32 is kind of the number I'd expect ultimately to happen. But also it's funny. I was looking back at my combine notes, and the combine we imagined at the time was a good opportunity for the Cowboys to negotiate with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons. Obviously, we know how that went. But I was writing how much would CeeDee Lamb get paid, and I used mostly at the time previous wide receiver stuff to project what could be the market. Joey, I was so off. Like, it wasn't even close, right? And again, this is before, to use Jerry Jones's words, many leaves fell. I was so unbelievably off. I looked at Devontae Adams. I looked at Cooper Kupp. I looked at AJ Brown's previous deal. I looked at DK Metcalf, and I looked at Deebo Samuels, and I looked at Tyreek Hill's previous deal. And my question was, would Dallas do a 4-year, $105 million with $70 million guaranteed for CeeDee Lamb? So that's what, 26, just over 25 million a year. And that's way off. Let's just call that what it is. But I also think that's before the market really solidified itself. And I think one storyline that people need to be careful about, Joey, is that, like, hey, if Dallas would have signed CeeDee Lamb at the Combine, they would have got him for a $26 million deal and beat the market. Now, I agree that if you can go earlier before other people are signed, before other leaves fall, you could set the market, right? But also setting the market is contingent on two sides agreeing to it, right? CeeDee Lamb's smart. He's got good agents. He's not going to just, all right, yeah, I'll take 26. Oh, but Justin Jefferson just got 10 mil more a year, a total of $50 million more guaranteed. Like, you can't force CeeDee Lamb to come to the table unless you shoot over the top with them to set the market. And I think the Cowboys have proven that they're not going to shoot over the moon with these guys to get them done. Guys that are top tier. Yes, I'll do it with Terrence Steele. Yes, I'll do it with Donovan Wilson. Yes, I'll do it. Insert player here. But when it comes to guys that are going to get paid lots and lots of money and set markets, I don't think they're willing to go there. So, I mean, the only way they would have got CeeDee Lamb early to sign is if they would have given him $32 million, I think, straight up at the Combine, right? And I don't think that was going to happen. Now he wants more, though, clearly, because Justin Jefferson has set the market so high.
Yeah, I feel like it's just a game of, like, the longer the Cowboys wait, I mean, the less risk involved maybe of, like, setting the market, quote unquote, but the more you're going to end up paying for him, for Dak, for Micah, for all these guys. They're just the more they wait, the more people are going to keep the market pushing higher and higher and higher. And they're just going to get more money, because it's like, I can't get less money than Devontae Adams. I can't get less money than Amon-Ra St. Brown. I can't get less money than Cooper Kupp. Like, I need to have, the only person that does have an argument is Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. And if Tyreek Hill wanted another extension, because those are the two that have proven, even like, and I know Joe Burrow's had some injuries and some stuff, but like Jamar Chase his best season was 3 years ago. You know what I mean? So that's another guy, I think, with like a sneaky and, that needs to kind of, have a good season this season to get really, really paid. So that's my prediction as of now. But my prediction at the Combine was, to use a lack of a better term, terrible. So we'll see, Joey. Any last thoughts on CD before, and on his situation or anything before we move on?
I'll say for the Combine thing that you kind of mentioned it, but I bet you it wasn't just the Cowboys not wanting to. I bet CD wanted to be like, let's see what these guys get before we like really get into negotiations, because he knew he can make himself a couple more bucks playing the long game.
Yeah, you never want to show your hand, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, you only show your hand when you've gone all in already, right? There's no reason to go all in if you're CeeDee Lamb yet. So we shall wait and see. Training camp is 3 weeks away. Before we go on to talk about Micah Parsons, quick reminder, sign up for our subtext. We got all the information online. We're going to start doing mailbags soon, but that's during training camp. I'll be able to send you guys a lot of photos and videos straight to your phones from Cowboys training camp. I'll be able to send you highlights from there, from practice. We'll do, we'll do mailbags. We'll do updates. That's very fun. Please check out our content on Lone Star Live. We got a lot of stuff going on there. Even though it's a slow period, Joey, we are not being super slow in terms of writing, right? We still have stories coming out daily. We still got other things. The other day I wrote a look at the Cowboys' best draft picks ever. They have so many Hall of Famers that they've drafted. It's kind of wild. So very interesting. But we'll figure it out. I go to Oxnard. I'll be in Oxnard from July 23rd. So the day they report is the day I report, all the way through August 12th. And then doing a little bit of reporting remotely after that to get ready for the season. So, I'll be there when they practice with the Rams in inter squad, which will be very fun. And one thing we've learned from their practices with the Rams, usually gets a little testy. There's usually fights. Even though Aaron Donald's not there anymore, though, who kind of seemed to be the catalyst in that. So we'll see what happens there. Should be fireworks down in Southern California. Speaking of fireworks, we had, I don't know if I'd call it a firework, Joey, but like maybe a little sparkler, maybe like one of the ones that kind of like just spins for a second and shoots out. And then, okay, you're like, that was cool. That was noticeable. We had a little skirmish online between Micah Parsons and Malik Hooker, which, to be honest with you, is not on my like bingo card of guys to kind of speak out on this. But Malik Hooker went on Keyshawn Johnson's podcast, and he said that he was asked about Micah Parsons, kind of about players having podcasts, and specifically about his teammate, Micah Parsons, who has a weekly podcast during the season. Micah Parsons is now the president of BR Gridiron, which is Bleacher Report's football subdivision. Obviously, he's got a big media role in addition to being a star pass rusher. So Keyshawn Johnson asked Malik Hooker on the podcast All Facts, No Breaks about it. And Malik said, quote, "My advice for Micah would be just make sure we're all right. Because if we're at work and the run game's terrible, but you're doing a podcast every week and you know the run game is terrible, then what are you really caring about? Are you caring about the crowd that was watching the podcast, or are you caring about the success of our team and the Super Bowl that we're trying to reach?" And I think, one, that quote was very interesting because it's kind of a question I think fans are asking too. How much of your devotion is on the field, off the field? But Micah Parsons saw it. And Micah Parsons, very active on social media, responded pretty quickly to the clip in a post that has now been deleted. He said, quote, "Just wish you said this to me, but instead on some podcast. And you got my number, family. And you my locker mate. So you could have just said this any day. And you do realize I shoot the podcast on our off day. Why aren't we talking about everyone's preparation and focus?" So Micah deleted that tweet. But his thing is like, dude, we're in the locker room together. You got my number. And if that's been on your mind all season, you're literally, I don't know if they're right next to each other in the locker room. They might be like 2 or 3 spots, but they are very close to each other on the same side of the locker room. That's something that easily could have been said, quote, off air.
It is an interesting debate of, should a guy that, the team hasn't obviously had the playoff success it's wanted, whatnot, should he just keep off of social media during the season? But again, it's not like it's someone that's a really like bad player or not, whatever. It's Micah Parsons. He is the best player on this defense. He's taking an hour out of his day to talk about a little bit about the Cowboys, but mostly just about what happened in the NFL in general. And he keeps it fairly vanilla. It's not like he's going on there and saying these crazy things. Other guys are playing video games for an hour. Other guys are watching TV. Other guys are hanging out with their family for an hour. Maybe he just doesn't have a wife and kids, whatever. I don't think I kind of side with Micah on this one, but I do understand where Malik Hooker is coming from.
I think one thing it does, this is not source, this is not reported, this is just an opinion from an external perspective. It does tell me though that like, at least that's something that's like on the mind of the teammates, that like, and I think it happens in workplaces all the time, right? Like where it's like, hey, I see this guy posting on Twitter during office hours, and then he's kind of working well, but also like, I kind of wonder like, dude, could you been even better? Or like, hey, like, can you help me out? Instead of like just tweeting your thoughts constantly about, insert team here. I think the thing about social media and podcasts and all that stuff is it's so visible. It's so publicized. It's so out there that when you put yourself out there, you also open yourself up for people's opinions about it. Right. And part of me wonders if maybe between that and the fact that he does all this traveling in the offseason, that he didn't show up to voluntary stuff, maybe some of the veterans on the team like Malik Hooker are like, dude, can you focus a little bit more on us? And maybe there's a little frustration of like, hey, our defense wasn't that great, and come on, dude, like you can go another level. Maybe that's what they're thinking too. But I also think that's something, one, that could be said on the side, like, hey, dude, I gotta be honest, man, can you focus more on our run defense rather than your podcast? That's something that obviously Malik could have just pulled him aside and said. Two, I also don't know if Malik really thought it was that bad of a comment. If maybe he was just kind of speaking in generalities. That's the thing with these clips sometimes that go viral is that like, that's one moment amidst a whole podcast. And Joey, we're doing it right now. Do you remember everything you just said verbatim for the last
Yeah, exactly.
35 minutes? No. So I think sometimes we got to be careful with that. But, I think that there also could be something a little bit there. But one other thing I want to touch on, and I've said this before, Joey, about Micah, and I use that like examples of like Justin Herbert and Marcus Mariota because I know those examples well, where people criticize them for not being vocal leaders when it's like in reality, dude, they're good leaders. They lead by example. They just might not be vocal. Stop asking players to do things that they're not going to do. That's just not them. Because I think if you do that, you're getting players out of their comfort zone. I think we need to stop asking Micah Parsons to be a leader. I don't think it's fair to him. Like, I think he's really, 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 really good. And you should take what he gets or what he puts on the field as what you get. Because guess what? He's fantastic on the field. If you're asking him to be a leader, I think in some ways you might be asking him to do something that he doesn't want to do or is not comfortable doing. That's an external opinion.
Okay. I wanted to bring something up. I actually wrote a story about this in February or March, but Micah went on the Stephen A. Smith's like podcast, and they were talking about comments DeMarcus Lawrence made, where DeMarcus Lawrence was like, by the time we got to the playoffs, like we were so tired because every team that we faced treated the Cowboys like it was the Super Bowl. And Micah said, like, I get that, but that's not an excuse at the end of the day. Like he said, but in the end, that's not good enough reason or excuse to say that publicly. One-on-one cameras off, sure, be my guest. But once the regular season ends and it gets to playoffs, you're supposed to feel rejuvenated. And I guess, this is DeMarcus Lawrence, who's low to mid 30s talking, and Micah, who's a young 20s type of guy. So obviously different points in their careers, easier to get up for a game, I imagine, when you're 23, 24 than when you're 33, 34. But the playoffs thing I do think is a fair argument for an NFL player. And he went on to basically just kind of talk about the culture and how he almost feels like the older players are, I don't know, in a different mindset, I guess, than the younger sort of players. So I wouldn't be surprised. And again, I'm not saying this like I have any sort of information, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is some sort of like dynamics on the defensive side or just in general in the locker room of like those older guys and those younger guys.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. And to be honest with you, like, I think there is a generational divide. It's Gen Z and millennial, right? Literally. Like, I think Micah Parsons is Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
Joey, you're 23 and I'm 30. Are there things that we necessarily probably see eye to eye on in terms of like, probably not, right? Because there is literally a generational divide kind of playing right now in that age range. So, there's a lot of things that, sure, I do TikToks and stuff like that, but there's a lot of things where I'm like, wait, that's news, or that's interesting, or people like doing that, and it's popular amongst Gen Z. So long story short, I think you bring up a great point, and I'm not trying to give it a pass here, but maybe there is a legitimate just generational divide between someone who's 24 and someone who's 32.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And he brought up how players say like they're tired going into games, and it's just like, we get that you're tired, but like you gotta get yourself up basically and get ready to play. Like it's the NFL, it's football. Like you got to get up and ready. But at the same time, these guys are putting themselves through hell probably on a week to week basis, especially if you're on that offensive or defensive line. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And I think one thing too, I said this earlier about Micah and even about us, like, I don't know if DeMarcus Lawrence, I've noticed as a reporter that sometimes when players are being interviewed or when people are being interviewed, sometimes they say something off the cuff or offhanded that they just kind of like throw out there that if you ask them like to follow up on that, they might not be like, oh yeah, no, that's what I meant. Genuinely, I don't know if DeMarcus Lawrence like came in there saying like, I'm going to paint this photo or paint this picture of us being tired, and that's the reason why we didn't win. So I think maybe it just kind of came offhanded, or maybe it was the perspective. It's one of those things with kind of up to your interpretation.
We'll never know. So. But either way, it does, like that report came out that some people are like annoyed with Micah or whatever like that. Really, like I wouldn't be surprised at all Like he is interesting in that generational divide, I imagine, and he's a bold, like he's always on social media, like you said. I feel like the older people have their reasons to get annoyed with him, but at the same time, he is a top what 3 player defensively in the NFL. So you kind of gotta. There's nothing you can really do, and it's not like he's a detriment to the team.
No. We use at our high school team, and I think it's actually just a good thing for like any team, organization, anything. People are either multipliers, adders, subtractors, or dividers, right? And it's because if you're an adder, that means you're there's positivity there, but you're not necessarily like the catalyst for positivity on multiple levels for multiple people and bringing them up to be positive. I think Micah Parsons inherently on his skill alone is a multiplier in the team because he makes multiple players better on the field inherently. He doesn't need the off the field like leadership rah stuff to bring other players up. Now the question is does his off the field stuff, his willingness not to go to voluntary workouts, is that actually kind of a subtractor that brings him back to an adder, not a multiplier? That's a question. But at the end of the day, he is a net positive for the Dallas Cowboys. And I think that that's something that they need to keep in mind when thinking about him, and what people need to keep in mind when thinking about him. It's a good segue, too, when you mentioned about top 3 defensive player. Just really quickly before we head out, he is the odds-on consensus favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year right now. So plus 500 right now. I use this thing called betting pros. Let me get this right. Betting pros. That kind of takes a bunch of different lines, adds, compares them and finds a consensus. He edges out TJ Watt as the favorite. The other 3 favorites are Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, and Max Crosby. But Micah Parsons leads the way as of right now. And I think it's kind of considering, 1, it's like a pseudo contract year for him. 2, he's been very, very, very close. 3, the other guys have done it and then broke through. So maybe it's Micah Parsons' turn.
I think so. And you said, where were his odds plus 500?
So that's the consensus odds based from betting pros based on multiple different outlets. So like DraftKings, for example, I think is 550 tied between TJ Watt and Micah Parsons.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyways, I don't think that's a bad bet.
Me neither. I did something actually, I think a month or so ago on this. The past 4 Defensive Player of the Year winners, 2 of them won the award in their 4th or 5th year. Nick Bosa, 2022, won it in his 4th. TJ Watt won it in his 5th year in 2021. The only other like kind of exceptions to that were Myles Garrett and Aaron Donald, who they are. But it's been kind of a common thing for players to win it at this point, especially when they have that proven track record of being very close to winning it in the years prior, that I think TJ and Bosa both did.
My thing with Micah Parsons, I think if he just did dry scoops of C4 every game, sure, he'd puke, but he'd get 3 sacks a game. It's a proven method. He did it against Carolina. He puked a lot, and he got after the quarterback. If I was him, I'd just say, hey, Marquise Bell, keep giving me the C4 powder. Let's get the pre-workout going, and let's get the little jitters going. So, I even get after the quarterback even faster.
See, if it wasn't Carolina that he did it against, I'd say I'd be on your side, but I think he could have done that probably after an hour nap before that game or something like that. Carolina was just struggling in the offensive line department last year.
Carolina was struggling in every department.
Yeah.
even in the owner's booth, throwing drinks and God, kind of a train wreck there. Anything, Joey, on your mind before we skedaddle out of here?
Karen Reed, mistrial.
Mistrial?
Mistrial.
Whoa.
Jury couldn't come to a conclusion.
Whoa, that's a development.
Yeah, so that's a big win for Karen Reed. And it sounds like they're going to probably go back to trial in a couple months.
Wow, that is fascinating.
Also,
I wonder if any...
Sorry, something I found out recently. The judge of this whole trial is like friends with one of the cops that's kind of been accused of doing the shady stuff that they're accusing Karen Reed of. That cop's kids call the judge like auntie, whatever her name is. Like they're on that close of a basis. Like they are close, and somehow she's still on this case. Because I guess one of the first things Karen Reed and her lawyers tried doing is like getting her off this case because she was so close with them, and she was on. I don't know if she'll be on for the next trial or how that goes in the judicial stuff, but that was kind of crazy.
We might just do a Karen Reed update every time there's news. So you're our Karen Reed beat reporter, because that's kind of a wild story. Mistrial is interesting development. Did not see that. So interesting. Well, all right. Well, we talked a lot of Cowboys. Reminder to sign up for the subtext. Follow Lone Star Live. Reminder, I'll be out in Oxnard. One thing I'll tell listeners is that these are investments from our company to go out and do the best coverage we can. So it'd be very awesome if you could kind of support that through reading our stuff, listening to our podcast, sharing it. That would mean a lot. That's all I've got. And that's another episode, Joey, of How About That Podcast.
Thanks for listening to How About That Podcast.